water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
All right, here we are. Fantastic. Let's get into it. Hi. Hello, everybody.
Right.
Hey. Welcome to a Not Normal interview. You know, it's a nice Monday here. I'm coming out of Kansas City, and yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So, yeah, the Not Normal community is just a new startup I'm working on right now. This is kind of the first interview, so thank you so much, Jason, for being here with me. Beyond that, you know, Not Normal, the foundation of it is just building a community that's centered around making space exploration, you know, understandable and accessible to everybody. And that's really what we aim for. You know, we have a drive for just refined communication and just getting more exposure to the space industry. So, you know, central to just the acceleration of commercialization and, you know, really building upon that multi-planetary mindset. So that's what we're here to do today. And with me, I've got a fantastic guest, Jason Parrish. Thanks for coming in. Why don't you introduce yourself?
You flatter me. Yeah, I'm Jason Parrish. I call myself a professional problem solver. I'm a avionics guy by trade and now a consultant in the space industry.
Awesome. Really looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be a lot of fun, and yeah, I hope everybody out there enjoys it as well. Consider joining the Not Normal community, and yeah, this should be fun. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So I want to start off just with a kind of fundamental question, you know, like what got you interested in space? What really drove you to join and be a part of the space industry?
Well, I think like a lot of little boys, you know, it's been fascinating for my entire life, you know, but really what really kind of gave me the extra boost is definitely having, you know, my grandfather being an aerospace engineer was definitely a big boost, because I got a lot of inside looks at the industry that most people don't get, you know, as a young child. So yeah, that's really what drove it for me. But I honestly, you know, I went through 25 years of aerospace experience without being involved in space, you know. So to be here now is it's a blessing.
Yeah, and you know, that's phenomenal, especially, you know, those influencers at an early age and just getting that, you know, experience with avionics. That's pretty much the gateway that a lot of people find is, you know, seeing airplanes, seeing those, and it's like, whoa, what goes beyond that, you know? There's something that goes higher than planes, you know. So I think a lot of people can really, you know, grab onto that kind of mentality as well, what drove them. So what is your favorite thing about the space industry? I mean, you've worked in so many different areas of it, you know. Is it the mentality, the culture? You know, what is it that you love about it?
To be honest, I think that my favorite thing about the space industry is that you know, like being an aircraft maintainer, there's a whole lot of joy in, you know, getting the call that like, oh, this aircraft is down and we got to go out and fix it and get it back up, you know. But like in the space industry, oftentimes you get to send things off on their maiden voyage, and there's a lot of terror in wondering, you know, it's gonna work. But like that feeling of never been done before is just irreplaceable. So I definitely have to say that's my favorite thing about it.
Most definitely, just that innovation aspect. I mean, this is technology innovation on another level, you know, stuff that a lot of people haven't touched before. And
Right.
we'll dive a little bit more into that, because obviously we're gonna touch on Starship and SpaceX. I mean, the core essentials of like space innovation. So from there, like I want to dive a little bit more into your background. I mean, starting with the Navy and building upon all those skills that you learned and the journey that you went through, to get to be a professional problem solver. So I do want to give you just some time to talk about that.
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, the like the position that I'm in now is kind of I would almost call it almost a mirror image of what I tried to do in the Navy. I was started as an avionics guy. I went to school for helicopter avionics. I worked on the Navy version of Blackhawks, which is the Seahawk and the Rescue Hawk and the Nighthawk. They give it all kind of hawk names, but I started out with avionics, and avionics was plenty challenging. Don't it's not that I am some kind of savant and was able to branch out into all the other areas of expertise, but once I in the Navy, they have a job called CDI, which is Collateral Duty Inspector. And basically what you do is, every maintenance task that gets done has to have two sets of eyes on it, and so whenever you finish a task, the CDI has to look at your work and make sure you did everything by the book, etc. And so once I got my avionics CDI, I started branching out, and I became we're petty officers in the Navy, and so every title has petty officer attached to it, and so I became a training petty officer and a corrosion petty officer, and that stuff was definitely cool, and it was a little bit of extra authority, and it helped it helped out with making rank and whatnot. But what I really wanted to do was like learn the other systems on the aircraft, and so I just kind of started working with the other shops, got into the electrical side, like electrical distribution, which is a completely different, job category in aviation. And then into power plants and airframes and weapons. I actually was like one of the first people to be an ordnance load team leader in San Diego without being an ordnanceman. It wasn't because I was like so spectacular at it. We had a guy leave, just as I was getting certified, and I was like kind of Johnny on the spot, but
Yeah.
I still got to put that feather in my cap, which was awesome, So I have we have a test that we do called CWTPI, and it's a comprehensive test of our weapons department's ability to, to load weapons and do their job proficiently and safely, And so I got to lead one of those, and my team loaded Hellfire missiles in front of inspectors, and it went well, and and so like it just kind of branched from there. And I just, like by the time I got out of the Navy, I was proficient pretty much across all the systems on an H-60.
Yeah.
And so when I, as I went forward, I got out of the Navy, and I became a welding inspector, and again, like it's another thing that just kind of fell in my lap. My father-in-law at the time did the job, and I was kind of blowing it off, but I was listening to everybody's warnings that like, why are you getting out of the Navy? Because I got out halfway to the career mark. I got out at 10 and a half years. And a lot of people were harping on me about, why are you getting out now? There's nothing out there for you. The job market sucks, etc. And, my father-in-law was making money hand over fist as a welding inspector, So
Yeah.
I went to a private instructor. It was a guy named William Fitzjohn who like actually helped write some of the building code, and so I was able to get like top level instruction from an insider, and that put me into all kinds of new things. I had to learn how to read blueprints and learn the building code, and it was different than aviation, but the same. Like the quality control process is fairly similar across industries.
Yeah, there's a lot that you can take from that and build into others. I mean, that cross-pollination of that knowledge is, I think essential to, how you get into the position you're in now as a professional problem solver, is just finding, ways to take the things you learn in that information and then applying it to other regions. It's very essential. Right. And so, I think beyond that, you got into like the search and rescue aspect. Like, was that immediately after the Navy that you jumped into that one? Or was it
that was about that was about 5 years after I got out of the Navy, after I had done the building inspection thing for a while.
Oh, okay. And you worked at Chevron, the Chevron plant with the structural engineer, like structural inspection.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that job because there was a lot of learning to be done there, you know, and working in an oil refinery is definitely eye-opening because you realize how much really goes on there, and the caliber of people it really takes to do those jobs. But my job was very hands-off, and I always enjoyed like being hands-on, and you know, I want to touch things, I want to build things and break things and fix them again, you know. And so I started looking for other opportunities. And at first I started, you know, I thought about becoming an operator at the refinery, but the path to it was just not, it was just too long, you know, and I wasn't that dedicated to that topic, you know, and it would have been like a permanent career change, and I'd probably still be doing that today.
Yeah.
And I had an opportunity come up to go back to aviation and be a contractor for the government. My brother-in-law actually was kind of pushed out of the Navy by, you know, a restructuring plan. And at the time, just at that same time, there was a search and rescue unit being started up by the Navy to cover the Central Valley of California. And they needed a civilian maintenance crew. And the base was primarily a fighter base. So there were tons and tons of fighter technicians, but a severe shortage of helicopter technicians.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he called me and said, hey, you know, there's a great paying opportunity out here. You know, do you want to come back and work on helicopters again? And, you know, prior to that, I would have, you know, if anybody asked me, like, would you go back to doing what you're doing in the Navy? I probably would have said no. But like at that moment when he presented it to me, I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. You know, and it was an especially peculiar thing because it wasn't just an established FAA repair facility or anything like that. We had to stand basically a naval unit, a composite unit up from the ground up. You know, it was all civilian maintenance, but we had active duty pilots and aircrew. And so we had to rewrite all the maintenance manuals to reflect the civilian rank structure, which is entirely different than the military.
Yeah,
you know, in the military, there's a lot of rank that, you know, there's a lot of authority that's just because, you know, like there's a lot more just because I said so.
Exactly. The protocols, they align those really strictly. And then when you go to the civilian sector, you get more lenience on that, and you kind of get to define them yourself, you know, so.
Right.
Yeah. More of an interesting problem.
So, you know, during my employment there, you know, it was awesome. We, you know, like we were there for probably 3 or 4 months before we even had a helicopter, just rewriting program manuals, buying tools, setting up all the work centers, you know, and we got to incorporate a lot of process management and process improvement stuff that I learned in the Navy, as far as like the Six Sigma, you know, the lean manufacturing techniques and stuff. It all kind of lent itself to that process. You know, even though we weren't a manufacturing facility, we still had a product in and a product out, you know, broken helicopters in, fixed up, you know, mission operationally ready helicopters out, you know. And so there's a lot of that stuff that carried over. And yeah, we had a great time. We got 3 helicopters that were in terrible shape.
Yeah.
And we basically had to tear all 3 completely down to their frames and rebuild them and get them, you know, full mission capable again. And we did in quite considerably less time than we would have if we were in the Navy, because I think that everybody there was much more dedicated and happy to be there.
Yeah. Which is important. It's important for people to want to be there and want to tackle those problems, which, you know, now that I'm getting a better understanding of like this sequence that you went through, you know, going from the aviation part of the Navy, then jumping, you know, into structural, you know, inspection and welding, and then back into aviation. You know, it's really seeing like a linear pattern, like how you kind of, you know, found your way into a company like SpaceX, which I know you did turn down the first 2 times that you kind of got offered to go there.
Yeah, my buddy Roger Sparks, who I hope is watching, by the way. He was one of the first people who called me and, you know, and told me he was at SpaceX. He was actually, I believe at the time, he was doing the development of the parachutes for the Dragon vehicle. And he would send me these awesome pictures from all the places they traveled to do their testing and whatnot, and telling me what a great time he was having. But at the time, when he wanted me to come to SpaceX, it would have required a move to Hawthorne. And I was born and raised in LA. I've seen those beaches,
Yeah.
and at the time I just didn't want to pay those prices to live and deal with the traffic and whatnot, and so it just wasn't quite enticing enough at the time,
That makes sense.
But, like while we were at the search and rescue unit in Lemoore, California, I met an Army guy, an Army crew chief named Jason Clark, who was previously a crew chief for the 160th SOAR, which is the Special Operations Aviation Regiment for the Army. They call them the Night Stalkers. And so everyone in that unit, to get into that unit, you have to be like a high level, high performing, technician or crew chief or pilot, or every job in there requires you to be at the top of your game.
The title itself kind of, it almost implies that. Yeah.
And like in the Navy, it's kind of the same, but not quite, because like all the West Coast Navy helicopter squadrons support special warfare, SEALs, EOD, SWIC, all the different programs. And just, when those tasks arise, like, oh, we're working with the SEALs today, we just kind of put the best people on those jobs, because those typically it's very fast paced and, and it's an intensive thing, but for the 160th guys, like I said, they just have a very high standard, and Jason Clark's standards were very high at the Lemoore Star Unit too. And he worked hand in hand with my brother-in-law and I. We taught him the ropes as far as how the Navy maintenance program worked. And he gave us a lot of insight into how the Army does maintenance. And then, I eventually, I chased a girl. I left that job chasing romance, which didn't work out, of course. But, years later, right around the same time as I was being courted by, my boy at SpaceX, Jason Clark called me with another opportunity to work on Army helicopters this time. And so I went out to Fort Irwin, which is the Army's big West Coast training facility. They have a big facility out in the desert called the Box. And the unit that we were supporting was basically a combination of search and rescue. It's an air ambulance, unit for taking care of the soldiers who get hurt while they're out there training, and then also a VIP transport. And while we were there, I got a lot of cool experience with upgrading helicopters, because we had, again, just like at the SAR unit where we got, the worst helicopters the Navy had to offer, and we had to refurbish them. All the newest and latest and greatest stuff goes off to combat, and to the warfighters who need it,
precisely.
Back here, we had some of the original Alpha model Blackhawks, that were just, they had so many hours on them and they were in such shoddy condition. But we upgraded them to, the glass cockpits and radios, where instead of having to manually program in all your radio stations before a flight, you could put an SD card in the dash.
Oh, nice. Just, more advanced avionics, and just really, just upgrading them out. So it's like pimp your helicopter kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So that gave me a lot of good experience with actually doing the installs and modification of wiring harnesses within the vehicle that we didn't really do too much of on active duty. On active duty, you might have to rerun one wire from end to end, but you really don't do a lot of modifications or complete rebuilds. They'll send the aircraft off for that type of thing.
Yeah, almost like minimal repairs on that side, and then And was this like a contracted job that you were working in, or was?
Yeah, this was a contract job. And again, eventually I I got bored and I left there. For a short period of time, I went down to San Diego and I did another contract. I actually worked in the same hangar that I worked in while I was active duty, and on the same flight line, which was very cool. It was very nostalgic. But again, that didn't really pay quite as much, and the nostalgia ran out pretty quickly.
Yeah, it does.
And I decided I wanted to, go back out to chase another girl. And so I did, and luckily this time it stuck. She's a young lady you heard me speaking to earlier.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So this time it worked out, and But during that period of time, I got to, I got to kind of delve into working for myself. I've always done things like photography. I've always been a photography junkie. So I got to shoot a lot of music photography, and I had my own thing doing automotive restoration and working on exotic cars and whatnot. And so the aviation stuff lent itself right to that, because the people who own $200,000 cars, they want technicians. They don't necessarily want mechanics,
Exactly. And there's a distinction there that I think is pretty important, especially when it
Right.
comes to like more modifications and upgrades and stuff like that. And,
Right.
yeah.
And because I just threw myself into that, people trusted my I guess my technical standards. I wasn't going to touch anything that I wasn't, certain that I could do. But at the same time, I had to do a lot of research and teach myself how to do a lot of that stuff, because I'm way better at taking the engine out of a Blackhawk than a Ferrari.
Yeah, but still that ability, to learn new things and grab on and just, I guess, be clear with people, this is something I can learn versus this is something outside of the scope where I don't want to dive into right now. Yeah. And just understanding that scope, making sure that's clear, and I think it's cool to kind of see how you made that turn from, working with other people to working for people, and then, the contract stuff, just getting, interesting stuff that came your way, and then finally, shifting that around to, well, what do I want to do? What's passionate, what am I passionate about, and building upon those and, finding your way there. So how did you make that transition from basically going from working your your endeavors that you were in, with the cars and with photography and all those things? How did you make that transition back into how was it that you're kind of doing your own thing and having a good time, and then somebody's just let me pull you back in. So
yeah, what's funny about that is the gap between technologies that I worked on from 1 week to the next, because I had gone through, my current girlfriend and I, who, we plan to spend the rest of our time together, but we did have some rocky patches, and we had split up for a while. Yeah. And I actually had moved up to Idaho with an old Navy buddy, who took me in and and took care of me and gave me a job, and I was enjoying being out there. And he was outside of Boise, Idaho, and I was starting fresh. I was freshly single, and I was enjoying the. He took me tubing down the Boise River, which goes right through the middle of downtown.
Oh wow, I'm gonna have to do that sometime.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I highly recommend it. But yeah, so I went out there, and I actually, I worked with him for a little while, and then I found a little better paying job doing flood and fire restoration, of all things, and we were working on a lot of old houses, and I was rebuilding kitchen cabinets, and because it's just everything mechanical is just kind of related somehow.
It is.
And if you just kind of throw yourself at it, and you've been doing mechanical stuff your whole life, you can pick most of it up. I definitely still have to defer to the to the experts in that field. The guys that I worked with doing the restoration stuff, it would have taken me decades to get as good at it as they were, but I could hold my, I could carry my own weight.
Yeah. Your ambitious nature probably carried a lot of that weight too.
Yeah, I had a good time. But I got a phone call one day from Jason Clark, the 160th guy from the SAR unit and the Army contract, and he said, "Hey, I have a job for you in LA." And my initial internal,
no,
LA, no way, I'm out here in the in this clean air in this beautiful place. There's no way I'm going back to the smog of LA. Mm-hmm. And then he started describing the Starship program, and at first, when he said SpaceX, I'd be like, yeah, I've turned that down before too, but when he started describing Starship, it was definitely something different, and he sent me some pictures, and I think the ground floor aspect of it, that it represented was definitely enticing, and then as I told him, okay, I'll listen to the pitch. I'll do the interview or whatever. And as it went forward, I thought like, okay, so now I got to drive to LA, just to do a job interview for a job I'm being convinced, to apply for or whatever. But he's like, oh no, they're going to fly you down. We'll put you in a hotel, give you a rental car. And, I had never been treated like that by a company before. So, that in itself, kind of,
it's exciting.
It held a lot of weight.
And extra money to the ticket, just, okay, well,
right.
you're going to treat me so with some royalty there.
Right. And a funny part of that is that, I got flown down there, and, during the run up to it, as I was preparing to go down to LA for my interview, I asked him like, hey, should I get some like letters of recommendation from the folks that I work with now or et cetera? And he's like, you don't need all that. Like I've already, I'm the guy putting the team together, and you have my blessing, like you're going to be fine.
Oh, wow. So you went through the standard job procedure of, should I get the resume, recommendations, right, or all of those things, just the references. And then he said, no, he knew everything that he needed. Yeah.
Right. And he also, he called my brother-in-law as well, who worked with us on the SAR job. He's the guy who got us both involved in the SAR job. But he wasn't there for the Army contract in 2015. So he and Jason Clark hadn't worked together since 2012. Mm-hmm. But the two of us were we were the first people that he called, and because he knew that we were both and he'll tell you this to himself, like he knew that we both had not only the integrity but the balls to do the right thing in whatever situation,
Yeah.
He watched me try to quit my job on several occasions over integrity issues. I've never really been afraid of a boss after the military, but so I got down to LA, and I started to get it in my head, like, I mean, they're not going to spend all this money on plane tickets and rental cars and hotel rooms on somebody they don't intend to hire, So I went into my interview pretty confident.
Yeah.
I had none of that confidence walking out of my interview.
Really?
Oh, I thought I bombed it terribly.
Were they asking technical questions and berating, I'm sure?
Yeah, we talked about a car that I helped modify. While I was doing my independent thing, I upgraded a car from the 1930s to a modern 2018 drivetrain, and they wanted to know how I aligned the rear end, how I adjusted the pinion angle, what I did about the 12-volt electrical system. They wanted me to quantify basically every line on my resume, which you should be able to do. It's not an unreasonable request. You just usually don't have to actually do that. Usually companies just want to kind of get a feel for you, and they can tell if you're if you made up a bunch of stuff for your resume.
Exactly, but they came in with the extra mile and said, let's make sure he dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and then could still
right,
take some measurements and retract, like almost reverse engineer how you put it together, because I know in the moment you're not thinking, oh, I'm gonna have to explain this in depth to somebody later.
Right. Yeah. And so I was out in the visitor parking lot after my interview, and I was just like, oh, that was terrible. There's no way they're gonna hire me. Like, I really should have got those letters of recommendation. I was thinking about that. And so I texted Jason Clark, and I said, like, I hope that went better than it felt, And he replied, and word for word, he replied, just call me when you get a chance. And I was like, okay.
Those are not words you want to hear after an interview.
Yeah. And so I called him, and he said, yeah, I didn't feel like you did bad. And I was like, okay, well, you didn't. That is a completely different sentence from you did fantastic and they're going to hire you.
Yeah.
And so, he was like, I don't know, man, I'll let you know. And while I was on the phone with him, I got a call from my recruiter, my SpaceX recruiter. And I was like, okay, she's calling me now. I'll get back to you, man. And I was just like, hello, here it comes. And she's like, yeah, the team was really excited, and they want to move forward with you. And I was just like, oh, I'm not. I prepared myself for a completely different, circumstance here. So give me a second. And I actually told her, I said, you'll have to excuse my old school mentality, but I need you to say the words to me. You got the job. She was willing to do that. She said, yes, you got the job. They're excited to move forward with you. And so that's where it started from.
Yeah, the psychological validation there is very nice to have.
Yeah.
So preparing mentally, for a different outcome.
Yeah, and what's funny is like from what I was doing, believe it or not, the job at SpaceX was actually kind of a pay cut as opposed to like the rest of the aerospace industry, because the entry level pay is a little bit higher for like government contracts and stuff than it is for a technician at SpaceX. But then again, it's SpaceX. It's not
Yeah.
The average government contract.
Yeah, and when was this that you joined them? Around like
This was
2018, 2017?
2018, yeah.
Okay.
And this was during the Mark 1 stage of Starship. Mark 1 was still the nose cone had been built.
Yeah.
And we were still working on the tank sections.
Mm-hmm. That was the Star Hopper age, and getting through that era to lead into Mark 1, which didn't fly, but it looks pretty.
Yeah. And so like we started, my brother-in-law went through the same process. My brother-in-law actually bombed his phone interview.
Yeah.
And it didn't look like he was going to get the job. And like Jason and myself both appealed to the engineer, who did his phone interview with, like, look, he doesn't interview well, but he's a genius. We promise, like, he'll produce,
Exactly.
My brother-in-law is not, he's not as casually outgoing as I am. He's not a public speaker. I would love to recommend him for an interview, but I know he would never do it. He just likes to be in his little corner and just be brilliant and be left alone.
Yeah. I could admire that.
Yeah. But, we started together. We started in Hawthorne. I can't, a lot of it's NDA, covered, but we started at a facility in Hawthorne that we were sharing space with some of the Falcon assembly guys. And we were working on, the Starship flaps, the early designs. And we were in Hawthorne for about 3 days. We did our our onboarding process, and then we started to get familiar with the crew that was already there, the structures guys. We worked hand in hand with the structures team, and we did a lot of structures work ourselves. But so we started getting to know those guys, and Jason Clark called us from Texas and said, "Hey, can you guys come to Texas on this coming Sunday?" And we were like, "Yeah, that's awesome. We're ready to go. We wanted to go see this thing in person.
Yeah, because when you talked about it, that's kind of exciting on its own to hear the idea of it. But then that first invitation to say, "Hey, come out and see what we're doing," that's exciting.
And so we were excited to go to Texas, and we're walking around SpaceX Main, where it's a fantastic facility. It's very high tech and very modern, and it's nothing like a government contract hangar for aircraft, And so we that day we're starting to plan, like, okay, well, let's start getting stuff figured out for going to Texas, and we're gonna we'll probably be there for a week or so, a couple days. And a couple hours later, he calls back and he's like, "Hey, I need you guys to come to Texas tonight."
Said, "Hop on a plane right now. We need you here."
Yeah, he's like, "Just go tell so and so that you're leaving right now, and get your bus to the airport." And so we did, and we got to Texas that night. I think we landed in Brownsville like around 11:30 at night, and the trip from the Brownsville airport to the build site is almost an hour. It's about 40 minutes, I think, from Brownsville proper out to the build site. And it was raining, and we got rental cars. Jason Clark met us there, and we followed him out to the build site. And as we're going, it starts to rain, and like South Texas is a very tropical place, so it's not like rain like normal people know it. It's just this tropical depression, storm, whatever you want to call it, downpour. It's out in the middle of a wildlife preserve, so there's no ambient light from the city or anything. It's just this 2-lane road through the middle of nowhere out to this place we've never been before. And there's places where the ocean actually washes across the road, and we have to hurry up and get out to the site before the ocean washes over the road, and we're stuck. We can't even get to the build site. And we arrive, and there's just like one building and a tent and a bunch of mud. And it's not SpaceX at all, and we walk into this this building, and we get our tasking for the evening, and like we started work that morning at 7 or 8 in the morning, and here it is midnight or 1 o'clock that night, and we're going back to work.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
That time frame just is a huge flip, but at the same time, I can understand how mind blowing it would be, to be within the same construct. Like this is SpaceX, and you're at Hawthorne, and you see the entire construction. It feels like high class, like luxury
oh yeah,
type of atmosphere, like that ambiance that they have. I mean, we've seen it with Tesla and SpaceX. I mean, it's kind of that refined sort of like luxurious, styling preferences, very modern, and I'm just sitting here like imagining showing up, at Boca Chica and expecting something similar. And, I've been there recently, and, so I kind of understand, where it's at now. And I've been watching the progression of it, how it started, just with Starhopper, a couple tents, and they were just, then they got the high bays up and they started expanding it. But, to go there from the beginning, before Mark 1 was even started, I mean, that shift, I think, is just really,
right.
really interesting, to think about, how it was kind of the foundation of that whole project and what we know, like, as a Starship program today, and how much traction it's gained and exposure is just phenomenal. I mean, it's the hot topic right now, with space.
Right.
And so to kind of hear like how rudimentary and small it started, I think is really special, because I think people kind of lack that understanding of it. It takes a long time to get somewhere, with these things, and understanding where it came from, and from ground zero, which you got to experience. I'm sure you just have a different perspective on the program as a whole, and so I would definitely love to dive more into just that experience of getting there, getting started, certain things that you worked on, different areas that you got to be a part of, and we had touched on it, a good amount during our call. And so I'd like you to just kind of share that story, with everybody else here.
Yeah. So we actually, like I said, we were, the integration team and the structures team worked real closely together. And because, the integration in the space world in general is the like the mission systems and the moving parts of a spacecraft, and so with the structure being developed at the same time, there wasn't really a lot of integration work. Integration technicians at the time for Starship were just kind of expected to be jacks of all trades, and just, get in there and do what you can do. I'm really not sure how into detail I could go, but I know we worked on the flaps. Our first project was the aft flaps for Starship Mark 1. And we had to replace some skin sections on the flaps with these sheets of aluminum that required us to drill, I want to say, 8,500 holes per flap. And I may actually be shorting myself, because it may have been 8,500 per side. I just know it was a lot of damn holes and a lot of riveting, because those first flaps were aluminum. But they were made of, aerospace aluminum, which is not, it's not the 3000 series aluminum that I believe cans. I believe like aluminum drinking cans are like 3000 series aluminum, which you could pretty much poke a butter knife through.
Yeah.
Aerospace grade aluminum is considerably harder, and you have to have some know-how and some finesse when you're drilling through it. And when you're drilling thousands of holes, you not only have to have that finesse, but you also have to conserve your resources. You can't just slap a new drill bit in every time you drill a hole because you ruined the last one. But yeah, so we got to get that set of flaps built. The pace was just incredible. The pace on an aircraft carrier is faster than most people are prepared to deal with, or want to deal with, really, I guess I should say. Like most sane adults don't want to involve themselves in that ridiculous level of work.
Yeah, and the pace is something I actually did want to touch on a little bit, because I know, their kind of value, as a company, is this like heavy innovation and just very, very fast. And I think the way he said it was like, fall forward, fall fast kind of thing. Or, I think there's that saying, test while you fly, fly while you test. kind of mentality. And I mean, it's just that iterative, process of just getting, that. And he really takes kind of a software development approach where you get the minimum viable product up, and then from there you just start writing iterations, you start making improvements, and just continue to build and manifest. And so I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people aren't prepared for that kind of pace, and just that really, really fast-paced mentality of just getting stuff done and getting it built and off the ground. And so that's really inspiring to hear, because it takes a special kind of person to really dive into that type of mentality. So, and so, yeah, working on like the flaps for Mark 1, I think was kind of the start of it all.
Yeah. So we started with the flaps of Mark 1, and then as it started to come together, as Mark 1 was, went to the pad and started to, prepare for, like cryo-proofing and that type of stuff. A lot of the subsystems started to come together. A lot of the building methods, like were evolving on a daily basis. There was a small team there of engineers and technicians. There were some integration technicians who had come from like the McGregor test site, who were there before us, and which is crazy because for me, it was this like infancy stage of this site. And there were people that had been there a year.
Wow.
With no, with no rocket, just getting ready to develop the build methods,
Prepping the site, getting people over there, getting, I guess, those intentions down before you start building,
Right.
The architecture.
Right. And so that original crew, like being there so early with that original crew of luckily we had like some SpaceX veterans there, who knew the company ways and were able to help us, at the same time as we were able to be there and like apply our like aerospace expertise. They were there to help us understand how to document that within the SpaceX computer systems, because we just dove right in. It was day 4 in the company that we were drilling holes in the side of the structure.
Yeah, I just got to work, and so then they came in and said, "Wait, we got to document all this. We got to get some sort of reference to come." Yeah, because in those early stages, getting that documentation and making sure that the next iterations kind of have that for reference too.
Yeah, and the speed at which things iterated, as far as not just the design of the rocket, but like the methods for production of parts.
Yeah, the manufacturing methods. Yeah,
the team of engineers there was they're much younger and like in some cases greener, but in some cases even more experienced than the engineers that we dealt with in the military. In the military, it's you send off an email and you'll get an answer back eventually, from an engineer, because like I said, we're dealing with established airframes, in that arena. But at SpaceX Boca Chica, there was a small team of engineers and technicians who just kind of adapted every day, and there was definitely a bit of imposter syndrome working with those guys. Like, am I really this good? I just hope I keep up, and so like to work with those guys and to have them, request that we come help on projects, it just boggled my mind, like, oh, maybe we are, but yeah, so like what I was saying about the iteration of the process, is that like we would bring in a piece of equipment to make a certain part, and by the next afternoon the decision had been made, like, we're omitting that part, we're omitting that machine, we're moving on.
Yeah.
And we've got this new machine in here. We've done all the research on it. Nobody's ever used one before. So meet us over here at 2:00 because we all have to figure this out.
So that's really intriguing. Just to touch on that very quick is that sense of you were there to kind of like tackle these problems and these just kind of get started, get everything moving, and then they would kind of come in and just make those decisions really fast, and then you would transition, like you would pivot, and I think is something that I've really kind of been paying attention to as far as just like the structural design, even down to just their welding tactics. I mean, all of those things I feel like have really pivoted so much from, what you kind of talk about with like this initial startup with Mark 1. I mean, we've seen it change so much. We've seen material design changes and just, they're just all the different tactics and methods. And I think the way you describe it there really gives me that extra perspective, and seeing how they'll just make that decision and say, this is going to be better for us. Let's pivot, learn this new machine. Like, let's figure it out. And that's really interesting.
and one of the things that I really enjoyed the most about it is that the team of engineers that were there, they like everybody like respected everybody else's expertise, but at the same time there was no pushback to like stepping into somebody else's realm of expertise. So like an engineer who's had spent their career doing CFD and designing tubing systems and whatnot, if you had an idea and said, hey, I think there's an issue with your pipe elbow here, they wanted to hear it. Okay, flesh out what you're saying and show me. And if you were right, then they would just thank you for your work and move on. And if you were wrong, they would explain, okay, thank you for your input, but this is why it's not right, and we moved right on. And it was phenomenal. I really enjoyed that. And I learned a lot too, because I was wrong a lot. I would poke my head in and be like, hey, I think this is wrong. And they'd be like, no, it's right because. And now I know this,
Yeah.
now I have, now I've added this to my, to my knowledge, and so
Exactly.
I learned a huge amount, from that initial team of engineers that I worked with, and I feel like they learned a lot from us as well, because
Yeah.
we did have, we did have all that experience working on maintaining aircraft. And one of the things, one of the main reasons that I would speak up with the engineers in that early phase is because I would view things through that maintainability lens. I would say like, yeah, your part works fantastically, but what if I need to change it? From the perspective of a technician, if I need to change this part out, this is ruining my whole day. And here's
Yeah.
a little thing. Here's a little thing you could do to make it a 15-minute swap, as opposed to let's take the rocket apart around it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that kind of cohesive mentality that they share, I think is fundamental to why they've had so much success like with that program. And, you talk about how, that shared mentality of like, my knowledge is your knowledge, we're going to work together, and that ability to like take in other ideas, even from, other departments and stuff like that, people with different expertise, and really, ponder those, describe those, like break it down, let's see the viability of it. And then, we'll implement it if that seems what's best. And I think that really fits, for that program. I mean, this is the first reusable rocket. I mean, when he pitched you that idea of like, this is going to be a fully reusable rocket, I mean, I'm kind of
Right.
curious what your mind said, like, are you like just what you thought when you hear that?
Well, to be completely honest, when I was first talking to him about it, and I first thought about it, like the whole production and manufacturing side of it hadn't even occurred to me. I just thought I thought about it in the terms of an H-60. Like, they're going to build this fantastic rocket, and I'm going to get to troubleshoot it and keep it flying. So the building of the rocket and the development of the building techniques, it never occurred to me that I would be involved in any of that. Like the early meetings, the team meetings that we had, where just the inclusiveness at all levels of the company was entirely new to me. In the Navy, in a maintenance department, every day at every shift change, there's a big maintenance meeting, and it's just the either the supervisor or the designated representative from a work center will go and attend a meeting. But on Starship, in the early meetings, it was everybody. We had whoever was getting the food that day. We had the civil guys there that were digging trenches. We had security guys. We had and the meeting would go around the room and address everything that was going to be done on the site that day.
Oh, wow.
And so everybody was on the same page, which was very cool to me.
Yeah, that cohesive mindset, like I said, I think is just fundamental to their success. And
Yeah.
and so like, working on Mark 1, you kind of got, the flaps there, and you got to work on those. And then I think we had talked about you kind of like were jumping, around different areas where, that development of what we now know as Starbase, I think is what I was like really intrigued about, because I had seen pictures, I'd watched the development. I mean, I was paying attention since Starhopper, and it really kind of got started. And then from there, watching the progression of it, seeing it, expand into what we now know as Starbase. It's phenomenal what you, your team, and everybody else that you worked with were able to manifest, from such an early stage. And so I'm kind of interested to hear how you approach that, like, and jump around and see like, these are the different things we're going to need, and like just tackling those, and like you said, just grabbing these new opportunities, because there wasn't a lot of people there, and so you had to work with what you got, and you had to start tackling problems.
Yeah, for one example is one particular piece that was needed for the construction of the tanks was a piece of metal we had to bend in a certain way, and this giant steel roller came in and got delivered one day, and my brother-in-law and I when we saw it in the building, we were like, "Ooh, what is that? Let's go over there and check that thing out." And the engineer who was in charge of developing those parts was there basically running through the operation of the machine and figuring it out, and we were like, "Hey, can we get down on this with you? What do you got going on here?" And he was like, "Yeah, please." And all help is greatly appreciated. And we just kind of over the course of like an hour, we were just kind of like, "Okay, why don't you get out of the way and let us play with this?" And he gave us a lot of insight. He gave us everything that he had put together up to that point. But being that everybody had 4 or 5 hats to wear that day, that engineer had other stuff to do as well. And so once he saw our interest in it and our perceived aptitude towards it, he was just like, "I'm more than happy to hand this off to you guys. This is your baby now." And off he went, and at that point we actually my brother-in-law and I both that was where a little bit of that imposter syndrome came in. We're like, "Uh-oh, have we bitten off more than we can chew here?" Because now we actually got to produce these parts. But over the course of a day or two, we got it figured out. I think I told you during our phone call, that was one of the ways that I developed a good relationship with one of the vice presidents, Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
It was during that stressful period before we had the machine quite figured out. He walked up one day and just said, "Hey, what's up, guys?" And I just shoot him away. "Hey, get out of here, man. We're busy." I'm out of my stressed.
In the books.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And he left, and then about 30 minutes later, our boss came back with him and said, "Hey, I want to introduce you guys to the, one of the build vice presidents, this is one of the highest ranking guys in the company." And I was just like, "Oh boy."
Oh no.
I'm so sorry, but he was so humble and just grateful for our help, and they always there's a lot that goes around about Elon Musk companies and how badly the workers are treated. And I had my issues with SpaceX at certain times. There was I didn't like everything, but that was not my experience at all. I definitely especially in that first year, I had never been treated so well by a company. I had a fantastic rental car, a big hotel suite. I couldn't ask for anything more. We worked a lot of hours, but you couldn't have kicked us out of the building. For that first couple of months that we were there working on Starship, that was how they got us to go home at the end of that. It was, "Look, you guys have to leave."
Well, when it's that interesting of a project, and when there's so much to do, and like you said, you're kind of that professional problem solver where you have this mentality of I want to build things, I want to work on fun projects and kind of just expand your mind with different knowledge and different opportunities. And then hearing you're pretty much getting all of that when you're working on something brand new, it's so fresh, and just getting to tackle so many different things, even though sometimes it seemed maybe this is too much, but double down, and you'd end up double down, get it done. And that's I think kind of that claim to fame there. That's phenomenal, just to be able to have that experience. And so I definitely can understand that. So what were some of the major challenges that you kind of faced? Because it seems like there's a lot to work on, treated really nicely, and then just so many different opportunities. But were there setbacks? When it got to SN4 or 5, you start getting into 8, 9, 10, 11, when some of them started blowing up, and what were some of the major complications that you had to overcome?
Well, honestly, across all the versions of Starship, the environment there was definitely always a hurdle. The pace was always just frenetic, and we always had a looming deadline, but the weather would just throw a wrench in the works at whenever it felt like it. We would have 24 hours to get something done, and then all of a sudden it would just rain, and there would be 40-mile-an-hour winds that entire time. And so now we can backlog that time and add it on to the new deadlines, and now we have twice as much to do, and we still have the same amount of time to get it done. And then, especially during that time before it became the starbase that it is now, with the nice smooth concrete everywhere, when we started making the barrel sections, the full rings to make up the structure of Starship, we had to figure out how we could move them around the site, on this bumpy dirt, and they're, until they become a welded part of a rocket with, formers and stiffeners and all that stuff added, they're pretty wobbly.
Yeah.
They're just big, goofy, wobbly pieces of steel, but at the same time, they have so much stored energy and so many sharp edges and dangerous places. It was a dangerous affair to move those barrels around, and and the weights were tremendous. So like if it was like muddy or whatever, there was the tasks that would be normal and fairly easy to pull off on an airfield, suddenly were 3 times as complicated, out there at Boca Chica. Multiple forklifts got stuck in the mud and buried, and now that's a new engineering challenge. How do you get a 40K forklift out of 3 feet of mud, and that's the biggest piece of equipment on the property, so now you got to go use small equipment to try to get the big piece of equipment out, and so there were those were challenges that, just popped up out of the blue, in addition to all the normal issues that come with developing a new vehicle. Like we would have a smooth process through the design and build of a specific part, and then we would find out that part just didn't work at all within the structure as a whole. And so now you've got a complete redesign, process to go through. And one of the challenges for us was, like, at the same time as that's going on, we'd have a big slowdown in like our daily expectation. So now, we have to find other stuff we can do, and that's kind of how, that's kind of how we ended up branching out. It's like, okay, we're stalled on this project. We have to wait for a redesign on this. So let's go see who needs help. And then that person who needed help, like, it's not just a stopgap task to finish until we can move forward with the other thing. No, it's a whole brand new set of issues, that we're adding to our plate, so that when that thing we were waiting on comes back up again, we're already doing another full-time job. And now now we're adding that, that giant task to our plate, so it's not, it definitely wasn't like, oh, I can't help you anymore now. Every time we said, hey, we're going to help you, we have to go from, beginning to end. And, so, those things would just pile up to where we had, basically 3 or 4 full-time jobs to accomplish in a shift, and that's why we'd be there for, 13, 14 hours at a time,
Yeah, exactly.
And it wasn't just technicians by any means. Like, that was the one thing that I really liked. And I to this day, I have a lot of respect for the engineering staff at SpaceX, because they weren't just sitting at their desks. They were out there, sweating and dirty and filthy, and for 14, 15 hours right along with the techs, doing all the same amount of labor as the technicians, and so that really inspired me. And I think that's, that was why I didn't mind, like, not making quite as much money as I could have at that point in my career, or any of that. I was building something very cool and working with people in a way that I had never worked before.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the excitement of that program alone, I mean, coming from an outside perspective, watching it is exciting enough, and just being attentive to the development, of this magnificent machine is phenomenal on its own. But I couldn't imagine just, how almost intoxicating it would be to, like, be there in person and be hands-on working on building it and constructing it. And, like you said, the engineers and the technicians, like, all of those just kind of, getting together and, working hard, doing the work that needed to be done to meet those deadlines, and, filling the gaps, and, getting all of that done. I think that's just a phenomenal mindset, as a company. I think that's one thing that they're heavily known for, is, just that community, that cohesive mindset to just get the job done and to tackle those types of issues. So I did want to touch on real quick before we pivot, just on, like, beyond, like, SpaceX. We'll probably dive back into a little bit more about, Starship and stuff later on, but I'm a little curious of, like, your transition out of that, and then, I think you worked, with Momentous, a couple other, like, companies, and now you're doing just some kind of freelance consulting. with avionics labs, propulsion labs, any of those stuff. So yeah, just take some time real quick. Just what your transition was out of that, and then what you're doing now.
Yeah, so as Starbase evolved into what it is now, now it's basically it's a full-fledged assembly line for starships. You can see SN21 is is coming up quickly behind 20,
Very fast.
And I don't think 22 or 23, or maybe they'll skip an iteration and we'll see 26 behind 21. But that's not me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not. I was never really interested in the assembly line part. The development and all that was what excited me, and the opportunity to go to a company like Momentous, where we're working on a smaller vehicle. It's a completely different environment, and it was, rather than the rocket swamp down there in Boca Chica, it was a high-tech clean room up in Silicon Valley, and it was a considerable pay bump, but it also represented being able to go back to those early Starship days where there's a very limited team and we have to do a broad variety of tasks. So like from the very beginning of joining Momentous, one of the first tasks that I did at Momentous was start to lay out a thermal chamber test lab, and buying tools to support that, and like down to laying out where the desks and tables are going to go, figuring out the power drops, and where the nitrogen is going to come into the building, and where we're going to put pressurized air, and it was very exciting. The vehicle was so much smaller, that I went from this massive rocket, to a launch vehicle. Well, I mean, really like it's not a launch vehicle itself. It launches on board of a Falcon rocket, but it's it would fit in the back of a pickup truck.
Yeah,
basically. And but it was very cool because it was a completely new type of propulsion. They've been developing their own proprietary propulsion method in-house, and that was exciting. The engineering team there is just as phenomenal, and just like it was a blessing to be able to meet so many people who were so skilled and so educated. I think I met 7 or 8 MIT and Harvard PhDs there, guys 25, 26 years old that are just like mathematicians, like at the peak of the world's game, and being able to work hand in hand with them, and it was the same type of environment at SpaceX where I could ask, like, hey, can you explain this to me? And they were happy to do so, and again, it was the type of environment where I just I was able to just casually mention, hey, I have years of experience as a welding inspector, and they're, oh, we got some welding for you to inspect right over here, and like, I'm pretty good with putting things together. Well, there's a ton of stuff to put together over here. Come help, And
yeah, so, it's that creative freedom, and that kind of puzzle pieces that you like putting together, and them just kind of needing you in different areas. I feel like you thrive in that kind of environment. I can definitely see that based off of with Starship and some of your other endeavors with the Navy and the contracting and your own work jobs, and just beyond that, it seems like that creative freedom is like foundational to like what you really enjoyed, was just being able to jump between different groups, being able to tackle different problems, manifest solutions, and definitely something to be inspired by. And so yeah, that sounds like a fun project, and just getting to work in a different subset, because I'm sure that like refined lab is a little bit different, switching up from Starship, Starbase, going to more like clean room style, a little bit more, I guess, refined methods or practices for constructing those.
Right. And I got to get back to more of the avionics roots, because my job title at Momentous, my technical like technically what I was supposed to do at Momentous was work in avionics, but I spent the majority of my time working in solar and mechanical development for the for future iterations of the vehicle, building tooling to help fabricate parts for the for solar and power and whatnot. Their their NDA is a little more restrictive, so I'm not allowed to really talk about the parts that we developed, but it was very fun. Like I got to work hand in hand with, like I said, a brilliant team of engineers who the thing that impressed me the most about the the engineering side at Momentous was in my second week, I want to say, I was working with the team that was developing solar panels, and they had a tool for producing a certain part, and they were tinkering with it, trying to get the desired results. And I wrote I drew up on the whiteboard, I drew up a completely different design, based on a more I guess a more traditional method of doing that same task, but a completely different design that we could build there in the shop. And that next week we were building it, and that's the way that part is manufactured to this day. And so I was definitely wowed by that level of latitude and and the trust that they put in me. And from there, like I like I said, the latitude was just the thing that was amazing. Just I was on several different teams at the same time. Like I said, I was the in-house welding inspector, and I really loved my time at Momentous. I did end up having some some differences with the corporate side, and so it was best for all parties involved that I went my own way, because I'm admittedly I'm a bit of a hothead, and I speak out. I don't hold my tongue, and from the time that I left SpaceX and I had kind of put my resume out in the universe, pretty much the entire time I was at Momentous, every couple of days I would get emails from companies like, hey, are you interested in this job, or are you interested in this? And I was I was definitely dedicated to staying at Momentous, but like getting all those emails just kind of let me know, like the demand is out there.
And you had the opportunities. I know you specifically mentioned Rocket Lab, and some of those others were reaching out to you pretty much at the same time that all of this was happening. And so beyond Momentous, what was the transition like there, kind of into this like a consultation type of mentality?
So basically what I did is I went back through my emails after I left Momentous, and I put my resume back out in the world, like, hey, please hire me. But then I called a couple of people, and said, like, look, here's what I want to do. I'm not necessarily looking for full-time employment with any company. Here's the type of task that I want to do on a daily basis, and would you like to just pay me per task to do that task for you? And from the contacts that I made, like you and I met on the Clubhouse app, and there's quite a few people on the Clubhouse app and in the various channels within the aerospace industry who are looking for exactly that. A lot of startups, they don't necessarily have the funding to throw at a whole team of technicians, and the pay and the equity and the healthcare and all that goes along with it. But they have tasks that they need to get accomplished right now, and it's easy for them to just pay to have that task accomplished. And
it seems a lot better for the startup companies, just like you said, that ability to put up that that equity, that construct of like full-time employment, benefits, everything that comes with that, and and then approaching it in a different way. Like, I know you have things that need to get done, I'm your guy to do it, and like I'll just do it per task. I think that's a great way to approach it. And so that kind of led you into more like almost like a private contractor, but you're consulting and you're kind of picking your own tasks and jobs. And so was there an instance where, and this is just like a free question, but it's like, was there an instance where you were like, yeah, I just do it by tasks, and they were like, no, we want you full time? Or did they ever give you a task that you turned down?
There's one particular opportunity that's out there where I tried to do exactly that, and the motivation for it was they say, hey, we can only bring you on full time, and it's more of a I don't want to put them out there, but it's more of a legacy company. It's like more of a established aerospace company, and they say, hey, we can only hire you full time, and I just kind of had to like say, well, then sorry, I can't do it, and for that particular one, it was location for me. I spent a couple of years in Arizona, and then I just came from the humid central southern Texas tip, And right now I'm in the Central Valley of California, which is still kind of a heat, hot dust bowl. When I'm getting ready to go over to the coast in Santa Maria, where I'll be setting up a Part 65, FAA repair station, with an aviation company. And my girlfriend and I took a trip over to Pismo Beach, which is right nearby, and I just decided, like, no, I'm staying where the weather is commensurate with what I want to deal with every day. And I'm not going back out to the desert. There's a lot of amazing opportunities out in the desert. There was the Dream Chaser vehicle is out at Edwards Air Force Base, and that was an opportunity. And then another one for the same company in Colorado. There was another opportunity in Colorado. It was kind of the same, but it was just not. I just no.
Yeah, it just didn't align with your current motives.
Yeah, I like the Central California coast. I'll come out for 2 weeks. We can build some tooling. You know what I mean, or whatever. But other than that, I'm really, like it's even the the long term, with the FAA repair station. It's still a contract thing, 3 to 6 months. And then like after that we'll see. If it's. If I bought a house or anything, like maybe I'll stick with that company, maybe I won't,
Exactly.
But in the meantime, I just this morning I had a conversation with somebody developing something fun in Slovenia.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Exciting, yeah.
And then there's a crowdfunded. I wish I'll Google it before we end here. Yeah. But there's a crowdfunded rocket being built in Denmark right now, and I just remember looking at that. I remember looking at their their structure and whatnot, and I was looking at some welds, and I was like, oh, I feel like I could add something there. And I don't know. It's interesting to at the same time as I have so recently felt like inadequate, like, oh man, I'm in over my head, to now I'm confident enough where like I want to reach out to people doing these incredible things, and they have twice the education that I have. Yeah. But I still feel like I have something to offer there.
Yeah, and you're just competent, in what and just being able to apply that and share that knowledge, definitely going full swing from is this too much? Like, can I handle this? Do I belong here? All these things, and then just being that person that's like, I'm going to speak up, I'm going to get my voice out there, I'm going to go, approach these people and say, hey, I can help, then that shift in mentality, I think is incredible. So that's phenomenal. Just like hearing, the things that you're doing and, things you're looking forward to. I mean, there's a lot of exciting stuff there. I mean, the space industry is blowing up like crazy, and you can't help but love it. And I do enjoy hearing just how like in depth and how much you're trying to be a part of it. I think that's really special. So I do want to make a pivot from there and kind of dive into some, I guess, a little bit more like deeper conversation just about a space, as a whole.
Right.
And I'm very intrigued to kind of ask some of these questions because you're more of a technical guy. I mean, going from all of your like structural inspection and welding to avionics labs and, aircraft repairs and helicopters. I mean, there's a lot of good technical there. So I'm curious, for the people that, aren't really interested in space, fundamentally, like this isn't something that they're truly passionate about or something they really like find interesting. Like, are there things that they should know? Are there things that they should be paying attention to just as a human?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think much like because of I don't know, I guess maybe because of the risks involved or just how huge a task it is to get 100 tons into space, or even a 1 ton into space, really. I think the one thing that's easiest to overlook, even when you do work in the industry, I think one of the things that's the easiest to overlook is the number of little spin-off technologies or products, or little gizmos and whatnot that have to be invented and developed along the way to make this happen, that kind of proliferate through the rest of our lives, and it's much like war, combat spurred so many developments and inventions that we use in our homes on a day-to-day basis. Exactly. That have nothing to do space, rockets, wars, none of
Yeah.
that, you know. Just the technology that has to exist, and you know, and the technology and the advances that have to happen in the technology that we do use on a daily basis. You know, like one of the things that I realized when I first came to space is that the whole Starship, like single stage to orbit, that idea, like without the booster and without taking tankers into space and without the multi vehicle trips to Mars, like the idea is we're taking rocketry away from what we had made it, and we're actually going back to more of like Werner von Braun's like original ideas.
Yeah.
That the math just wasn't there to support at the time. Now we do have the computing power to do the things that Werner wanted to do. Like we can just launch a rocket, launch a vehicle, land it on Mars, land it on the moon, and then just have that same vehicle fuel up and take back off and come home. That's what he always wanted to do. And now we do have that math. And
yeah,
it was the space industry and the industries that sprung up around the space industry, that made things like that possible. I think really that kind of encompasses it. I think that the things that I would want people who are not interested in space to know about the space industry is how important the development in the space industry is to the ease of daily life that they enjoy.
Yeah.
A lot of the from the and like as we go deeper and deeper into space, we have to build more and more robust communication systems that can transmit bigger bandwidths of data across longer distances in shorter times. And I'm doing this right now from an iPad Pro that has the processor of a MacBook Pro, and multiple cameras, and it's none of this would have happened without the space industry, without the military complex, like without all those massive drivers. We wouldn't be nearly as far along as we are.
Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't agree more, just with that conceptual idea that it pushes, the frontier of innovation, when it comes to technology. And that's essential, things that people should know, about space is don't take it for granted. Don't take the industry and what they're doing for granted because, like you said, they're out there creating new technologies, inventing new technologies for their inventions, like for Starship, for Falcon 9 and like Dragon, all these things. Like they're really pushing the bounds of innovation. But at that same time is they can redirect or reapply a lot of those technologies that they're inventing from scratch into stuff that's going to be integrated into our daily lives. And that's happened around so many corners of the space industry. I mean, all the way back to the Apollo era. I mean, so many different things were invented on the spot because they needed it for those missions. And then, basically somebody took that idea and was like, we could use this in our daily lives. And, there's so many things that have been pushed that edge. And like you said, war was a big factor in that. And, in all realms of, human history, just war kind of pushed like new inventions. It just, we wanted a leg up on people. And so we wanted to have an advantage. And so we were inventing new ways to have an advantage. I mean, that's how, rockets and, space exploration even got started, was just, we want something that we can just deliver from here. And so that's definitely foundational to, I think, what people should know, and, just considering like some of the counter arguments, like why should we go? There's a lot of problems here on Earth, and, and there, like we still have, we haven't discovered, much of the ocean yet. I mean, there's a few counter arguments out there as like why we shouldn't be pursuing space exploration. And I'm kind of curious your thoughts on those counter arguments, because I think the way you touched on it, saying, technology is important, that drive, that innovation, that invention of new things, and then reapplying them to our everyday lives and civilians, and is kind of like, is a really good answer to those counter arguments. Just saying there's certain things we wouldn't have had we not like tackled these endeavors, and certain things that we won't have in the future if we're not doing this now. So
Right.
Yeah, your thoughts
I
on
think
that?
I think that what I represent, like as far as being a do all the things guy in the aerospace realm, and that team of engineers that were at SpaceX Boca Chica in the beginning, who are so talented and willing to deal with those scenarios and that environment that they were in to pull the things off that they did. I think it's important that people remember that those people exist across the gamut of massive problems. There's somebody like me who has been working on ships and undersea vehicles and around the ocean, and has the same type of I don't know, just like multidisciplinary interest. They know how to fix a ship engine just as much as they know how to keep the radios working and get up on the tower and get the Furuno going and have the radar image coming in, and they can fix the capstans that bring the anchor chain in, and you know what I mean. And that guy is supported, or woman, that woman is supported by a team of engineers who are willing to stay up all night on that ship, rocking back and forth, doing calculations, and to map the bottom of the ocean and to find the species that we haven't found yet in the bottom of the ocean, and to properly measure the different layers of the atmosphere to figure out how we can best manage the levels of harmful chemicals and mitigate greenhouse gases and the rising temperatures on the earth. And there's a geologist somewhere figuring out how we're going to deal with the sea encroaching on the coastline. Like those people are out there.
Exactly. And that dives into like a deeper philosophical thing. We're trying to quantify everything. We're trying to map everything and understand everything. And
right. I try not to, I definitely like, I for sure, like you can hear my eyes roll back in my head when somebody says, "Oh, why doesn't Elon just solve world hunger?" Like, oh man, like if it were only so simple, if you could only just throw money at it and it would go away, But at the same time, like that world hunger person is out there, that multidisciplinary technician and that team of engineers and that that brain trust they're out there, and they're I at least have to have faith that that's happening,
Yeah, the optimism that they're just out there doing incredible work. I mean, just for almost every specialization, you're going to find like an incredibly passionate, like driven human who wants to tackle every aspect of that. Whether like specifically with world hunger, whether it be just the distribution, whether it be homelessness, whether it just be like third world countries that don't really have access, to certain things. I mean, they're just trying to grab onto all of those, and I think you're absolutely right. Like you're gonna find somebody who's driven and passionate to tackle those problems, and just kind of knocking somebody for doing that same thing but for space, and we have our passions and ambitions.
And like we talked about earlier, so many of the technologies and the methodologies that have come out of not just space but aerospace in general, that that have improved not only like life but like like the human condition and our capabilities as humans across the board. One of those may eventually fix those other problems. It may be a breakthrough. It may be a breakthrough in figuring out how to feed astronauts on Mars that helps us feed the planet.
Exactly. And those types of constructs, I mean, even with like the housing situation, they were trying to develop different methods for creating little like pods, 3D printed pods for people on Mars, and they might actually use that here on Earth, like 3D print a house,
right.
And just provide housing roofs for people that are homeless, and it's just those types of things, those type of brainstorming sessions. I mean, it starts with people in a room just brainstorming ideas, like how can we solve this problem? How can we manifest that? I mean, I was in a Clubhouse chat yesterday with tons of people from Small Steps and Giant Leaps, and we were talking about how to build a city on Mars, and we were having like a big brainstorming session, and people were bringing up great questions and all different topics, but it starts there. It starts in those rooms where people are just expanding upon ideas, because then you're going to get different people that are going to take those ideas, implement them, and figure out a way for that to benefit humanity. But for me, it's like a central core of the inspiration of going to space, that because that's something that drives people like more than war, more than almost anything that you can find here, on Earth, because it's something almost like a shared passion between humans. It's just there's something beyond there, and we want to go figure out what it is.
And that's definitely been inspiring to me since I've since meeting people like yourself, on Clubhouse and talking in those rooms, especially those small steps and giant leaps rooms. There's people in there involved in those conversations about colonizing Mars and creating these viable habitats for people on another planet. There's people in there who's in their bio it says like, hey, I'm a dog groomer and I'm just a big fan of space stuff.
Yeah.
But their contributions to those conversations are on the
magnificent. Yeah.
They're on an elite level. They're bringing up valid scientific points. They're backing it up with the math. They've done the research. They may not work in that field yet, but a lot of those people are just mind-boggling with
Exactly.
the know-how that they have, and I think it's all driven just by the passion that they pull out of the mystique of space.
Yeah, just that curiosity. It's so rooted, in who we are. So
yeah,
it's crazy, yeah, to see these like people with so many different backgrounds, so many different specializations and things that they're passionate about, and just to kind of collectively come together and share these really intriguing like brainstorming sessions or just like bounce ideas, just off of, yeah, like you said, they're bringing so much to the table, whether it just be like really, really like thought out questions, things that we should be considering. I think we had somebody come in there, it was just like, it's like, would we bring insects? And everyone was like, hang on, like we haven't thought about this at all, It's
right.
like, and so then we started breaking it down, and a lot of people were jumping in and talking about it. And then we had somebody, come in that was talking about, like he was specialized somewhat in that area. And it's really intriguing to see how those conversations get started. But, that inspiration, all of that starts, in rooms like that. And those end up turning into ideas that are going to revolutionize how we live today.
Right. And that's why I was so excited to take part in what you're doing, because you're one of those people who was just, you were just inspired and said like, okay, so I'm going to create this thing. And like what you're doing is, basically unprecedented and monumental, and 15 years ago or 20 years ago, a lot of people would have told you that it was ridiculous, and some people might tell you that today, but like myself as a technical skeptic, I think it's fantastic and I want to get involved, I like that's why I'm here,
Yeah. And I couldn't thank you enough, just for reaching out. I mean, you were immediately, I was just like, I'm building this new thing, kind of trying to get something started. You were like, I'm there, like what can I do?
Yeah.
And it's that type of mentality. I've gotten so much support, I think, from people in the space industry, because I feel like they see the need there for refined communication, for a different outlet to get more exposure for the industry, and to kind of share these intriguing experiences that people from all different kinds of backgrounds have, and that's what I intend, is like, I'm not just going to have, astrophysicists on here. I'm not just going to have, rocket engineers and these, high level, orbital mechanics, conceptual cosmologists, that's not what I'm about. I want to explore, the groups of people that come from different backgrounds, in everyday life, like you said, a dog groomer who can come up and just, absolutely just know so much about space and just be inspired and love it, and then, there's like people just I meet in stores, that I have decent conversations with about space, and just in random places. I think it's phenomenal. I think I was at a park one day and I was wearing like a NASA shirt, and just ended up sparking a conversation with a guy that was like just walking around too, just hanging out. And I mean, it's just those types of stories. That's what I want to share is, you don't have to be in the industry or, necessarily, engulfed, like consumed, by what's going on, but, you can still be passionate and be inspired by, everything that's out there. And so I think that's fundamental. And again, I can't thank you enough for being part of this. I grew up here outside of Kansas City, and we didn't have hardly any exposure to space travel. I mean, it's so different going to Houston, Florida, I mean, where they see rockets going up, and even getting to see the Boca Chica site. I mean, I saw people bringing their kids out there, and the Houston Space Center. So there's so much exposure there. I mean, these kids just have so many constructs and so many different, places and activities they can go, or even in their schools, they're talking about it, and then, you get from where I come from, like central US. I mean, even probably out near LA and stuff like that, they have more exposure as well. Vandenberg and some of those bigger Air Force bases, which I think for me, the only exposure that I got even close to it was Whiteman Air Force Base, the B-2 bombers.
Oh yeah.
At an early age, I mean those blew my mind. I mean the stealth tech, and I was just like, it's a single wing, like it's literally just an airplane that's a wing. And so that was the only exposure that I got to anything beyond that, and then I was lucky enough to have sort of a nerdy father who was intrigued by it, got me some exposure. So, but people don't get that, like kids don't get that, and unless you have a family member or somebody that's really interested in a friend, something that's interested in that field, you're not going to get that exposure. You're not going to get that awareness. And then and I've been in certain areas. I've been to a lot of states here in the U.S. I'm trying to get all of them. I think I'm at 28 now, but and I've seen so many different areas that just lack that exposure. They don't get to see it, and and then I start trying to spark up a conversation like, well, what do you think about it? And they're like, I don't know what's going on. I know they're doing something, but
it's it blew my mind how many people actually, like in Brownsville, they had no clue what we were doing out there by the beach. Like I would show them the SpaceX website and be like, the big Starship rocket, and they'd be like, oh, that's here. So even the places that do have access to it, the people, like it's not entirely mainstream yet.
Not at all. And that's definitely something I aim to fix. It's just bringing it to be something that anybody can talk about in any given conversation, and just having that reassurance that like you could spark a conversation about it with anybody, because I think it's something. There's certain things about it that we should all know, because we don't see it now, but it's going to be integrated so heavily in our society. I mean, the technology and the construction of our modern society is built upon that ability to go to space, but once we start getting more people up there, I mean, they're going to have to know. They're going to have to take notice. They're going to have to pay attention. Right. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I just had an interaction on Twitter just the other day, with I think I posted a picture of one of the old South Texas launch operations hard hats,
Yeah.
And somebody said like, oh, I hope to be wearing one of those hard hats someday, And I like responded to him. I said, don't hope, plan, shoot me a message and I'll help you put the pieces in place and we'll figure out how to get you in there, And
exactly.
He messaged me. He's not a United States citizen, and I was like, okay, well, and he wants to be, and he plans to be, and I was like, okay, well, here's the things you can do along the way, so that when you do get your citizenship, you have the resume to get yourself in, and and he was so excited, and and I just like, for me, it's like that's that's even more rewarding than watching the rocket launch,
Exactly.
is to help somebody else get to do what I get to do,
Yeah, and just see that kind of inspiration come up. And I do want to make that shift between people thinking, I hope to do this, to like, no, this is something I can do and I will do.
Right.
Because that's a common misconception, with the space industry, and because when people think like, oh, I want to contribute, but it's like, do I need to get a PhD? Do I need to get a master's degree?
Right.
Do I need to have all these certifications and all this expertise? And I think you really like epitomize, if like you'll find a way, like you'll make a way, through what you do best and through what you're passionate about, and there's always a way to contribute, and people don't see those different lanes, they kind of see a singular path, but that's because it's intimidating. And don't get me wrong, like thinking, about the space industry, all that stuff, like it's intimidating for a lot of people. It seems like a lot to comprehend, a lot to take in, but let the inspiration carry you.
Right. And I mean, honestly, like, I would tell anybody that, like, for, the guy who was not a citizen, like one of the paths that I suggested to him was the military. I said, you're going to get, technical training and experience that like a lot of American employers really want, and even through that path, when I think about the steps that I took, the first time I ever stepped on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, I never wanted my mommy so much,
Yeah.
there's been so many moments. There's been so many moments along the way where, like, even the first day in boot camp and the first day up on the flight deck and the first time standing out in front of a helicopter by myself, where I was just like, oh, I am way in over my head,
Yeah.
And now so many of those things are routine, like I used to crouch down so low when I was just a line rat going to pull the chocks, out from under an 60. The rotor head was 12 feet over my head. I was in no danger whatsoever of a rotor blade hitting me. But the sound and everything is so intense, and it's so new at that point that, like, your brain just still can't. Your brain doesn't process it, and it's like, crawl over there and get it, And now I just I stroll in and out of the rotor head as if it's happening in my driveway.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Just kind of like gaining that competence, but through experience. And just kind of getting started. Getting your head in the game and getting that exposure. And ultimately, I do aim to provide a platform. That would allow somebody to at least gain that preliminary knowledge that can get them to the next step. And help them find their path to contributing to the space industry, which there's so many different ways, but unless we have a centralized location where somebody can explore those and ultimately tie it to what they're passionate about, because I think that's what's important here is just aligning your contribution, your impact to the industry, like through what you love to do. And so ultimately I'd like to build a platform that can get there and help guide people. So I think it's phenomenal, how you came so far, and ended up finding, made your impact, in the industry. And I love hearing about that. So to pivot like a little bit more, just kind of more slightly existential, I guess, on human philosophy, but like, what does the future look like to you? Considering everything that's happening, you got to work specifically on Starship, with Inspiration 4 happening, and then, I don't necessarily want to touch on like geopolitics, but,
Right.
In the sense of like long term, like where, like, what does the future look like to you?
What's funny is, it's not the first time I've heard this question. And I feel like 5 years ago, before I was ever involved in the space industry, I feel like I would have had a lot easier time answering then. You would think that having been involved now and worked in multiple facets, that I would have a narrowed down answer. But I feel like, honestly, it's broader every day now. Every time I learn a new thing, or I talk to like you and the Not Normal thing and the idea of civilian astronauts, that opened up the scope even more.
Yeah.
Like I have less of an answer to that question every day.
Yeah.
But I have less of a less cohesive answer, because like I feel like more is possible every day.
Yeah.
I think that the like the work that's going on at companies like Momentous is absolutely necessary. The Starship has the potential to revolutionize not only space travel, but international travel, and the ability of a vehicle like Starship to influence global shipping, military operations, medical procedures. You can move an entire operating room from one side of the planet to the other in a couple of hours. You can take a world-class medical team and put them on the other side of the planet same day.
Yeah, disaster relief, all those things. It's just going to be revolutionary.
Hundreds of tons of relief aid, can move around the planet within hours, where it used to take days, and where it used to take months prior to that,
Yeah.
So I really think that we're just kind of rolling off the edge of like I don't know, just like a steep, just an ocean of new possibilities, that, like I feel, almost, I can't remember the name of the equation that says that the number of transistors or whatever on a chip doubles every year. It's a computer thing. I can't remember. It's like the number of switches on a chip doubles every 2 years. It's some kind of equation. But I feel like with where space and aerospace is going, and like we talked about the technologies that spin off of it, I feel like we're just seeing it really start to branch out. And I think it's going to get just exponentially wider, and I see more than just SpaceX operating at the level SpaceX is right now. I think that where Falcon and Starship are now, I think that within 50 years, maybe there's 50 companies that are exactly at this point,
Yeah.
And maybe Starship is on Mars. Maybe Elon's moved his whole operation to Mars at that point. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And that's a good point to bring up of just, the interplanetary travel, just intercontinental. I mean, that's both of those constructs, I think, are massive, and specifically diving into, how Starship's going to reinvent, how we ship stuff, across the world. I mean, like, I think they were basically saying like New York to Hong Kong in basically an hour. I mean, like you can go halfway around the world in an hour. But I think something else to consider is, when they start doing passenger flights and stuff like that, that's going to be the precipice to actually getting people, up into space. But at the same time, they will be traveling to space like, for a short amount of time, but they're going to be there and they're going to be able to look down at the Earth, for a good handful of minutes before they start re-entry. And like, I think that is kind of the core value of like where our future leads, because more people are going to get to experience the overview effect and kind of see the Earth in its entirety, even if for 30 minutes. Like you're gonna be able to witness that. And I've been in a lot of rooms where people were like, "Is this going to happen in my lifetime? Am I going to be able to see this?" And they were like, "I'm 50, I'm 60. I don't see it happening. I'm optimistic and I like to sit here and think that it's going to happen, but it's like I don't think that I'll ever get the opportunity to be there." And I'm trying to push this narrative for everybody. It's like, this is happening. Like, this is accelerating so fast. We don't, and unless you pay attention, like, you're not going to understand how much it's accelerating, how fast it's moving. And, I see that intercontinental travel at least getting started within the next decade,
Oh yeah.
easily, if not already like within the next 3 to 5 years. Or before then, we don't really know. I mean, depending on SN20, 21, I mean, they're gonna start putting stuff on there and they're gonna start flying it, and it's gonna be phenomenal to see that expansion. But I did love your answer, just saying it gets broader every day. Just the possibilities and just kind of seeing that perspective. That's
Even if you see it from the most cynical perspective, even if you see it as a failure, even if Starship never gets to Mars, if Starship just achieves that intercontinental travel, it's still it's a massive success. It's a wild leap forward in travel and capabilities for humans.
Yeah, and then reinventing like how we live, like how we travel, how we do anything. I mean, and then Starlink at the same time. I mean, there's so many different constructs that are being manifested. I mean, through smaller companies as well, like getting more satellites up there. I mean, they've got OneWeb and all these things just taking advantage of the space industry and what we're doing. And it's phenomenal to see just how many different angles people are approaching it from. It's like, what can we do to make life better for us, but also give us something to look forward to. And that's something that Elon, I guess, doesn't stop talking about is I want an exciting future. And so that image, I think alone,
One of the things that I'm super excited about, especially with like Starlink, is making the all the information that's on the internet so much more readily available to people in like third world countries.
Yes.
I'm sure everybody sees on YouTube and Instagram. There's always a video of this kid living in squalor in India who got some 1/4-inch steel tubing and a welder and some bike parts and built a full-size replica of a Lamborghini. You know what I mean? Or something like that. Like, I don't think that the average Joe realizes like the intuitive engineering brain that that it takes to do that. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I built, I could probably pull it off eventually, but like to have both the mechanical aptitude and the eye to get the angles right and and to do it, and the dedication to do it, and the conditions.
Dedication. Yeah, exactly.
It's just, it's next level. And I think that once we start to empower those people with technology, I'm like, that's why everything keeps getting broader, because it's going to take a smaller and smaller pool of resources to do, things that were impossible 100 years ago.
Yeah, and that's definitely some important points to bring up, is that exposure, of these technologies to places that don't have them. And then, we're going to see just such a boom of like innovation, from those sectors specifically, because when they get access to that information, when they get access to like better technologies, I mean, their creative mindsets and their ambition, their drive to utilize that to build and create stuff and invent stuff, I think we definitely take that for granted. Or we don't really understand it yet, but like you said, once they have like those in place, I mean, we're going to see such a boom, of ideas just in general coming from those sectors that didn't have it before, because they've been sitting on these ideas. They just don't have the tools to manifest them.
Right.
And they work with what they have in the environment that they have, which isn't kind to them. And so constructs like that, things that we're doing like in the space industry is helping push those ends, and I understand like there's people that are like, we need to focus on what we're doing here and focus on the earth, and I couldn't agree more. Like there's a lot of problems that we have to solve on earth, but I think I'll be the first one to tell you that we can solve a lot of those by going to space.
Right. And like we talked about before, the person who solves world hunger, it might be a person in sub-Saharan Africa who doesn't even have electrical power today, but has internet access a year from now because of Starlink, and gets information from the internet and just starts digging into this problem, and has always had the processing power and the wherewithal to attack this problem, but just didn't have the technology and the access to data. And then once they're given that stuff, like the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to manifest itself, I think, through that end. And that's definitely a great point to bring up. So we did kind of touch on this, just the importance of bringing like the awareness and, that exposure of, the space industry. And we kind of expanded that on to just, information as an entirety, getting that to all different places, which ties into, what they're doing with OneWeb and Starlink and, universal, worldwide internet is a foundation to that. But specifically just getting people, inspired about, space, what we're doing and how it's helping, shape, the way that we live, and continually making, life better for humans here on Earth, while also, expanding life to other celestial bodies, getting to the moon with the Artemis program, getting to Mars with Starship. I mean, these are things that are happening, these things that will happen, I think, that they might have some setbacks, but I feel the drive, and I feel like it's going to happen. So, what are your thoughts on just like the importance of like bringing more awareness, to the industry?
I think it's definitely huge. I think that, the fact that I'm the person that's here, right now having this conversation with you kind of boggles my mind, because to kind of go, a little back to like the existential questions, like, you and I talked about it a little bit on the phone, but like, I've had some privileged moments in my life, but there is definitely a lot of moments in my life that a lot of people are in right now. Like being homeless, drug addiction, alcoholism, like all these things have played a factor in my life at some point.
Yeah.
And I've been at that low point multiple times where I just thought like, oh man, this is it for me. This is what it is.
Bottom. Yeah. This is what I'm held.
And so like, it actually, like we've talked about, like it's so cool now to be able to talk to somebody who's feeling that way and in that position and be like, dude, if I can do this, you know what I mean? Like, I like that's I guess, it's maybe not the most prestigious thing about my life. You know what I mean? Like, as much as I would want to just be like, hey, I'm one of the original members of the Starship team, and I want to just go and fly that flag all around. Mm-hmm. I would much rather fly the flag of like, oh, I was a poor kid, like I was a poor adult, with no formal education or whatever, and like I'm influencing the way spaceships are built, Mm-hmm. So like, if that it doesn't even need to be me, I never need to involve my name in it. People just need to know that kid can go to that place,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's I think that's what's the best thing about this emerging space industry is that companies and hiring managers, you know, and people like Elon are focusing more on ability than paper trail.
Yeah,
you
just
know?
that aptitude, you know, and that the mindset, the mentality, you know, and they're definitely focusing on that because it's straying away from, you know, that linear path of go to school, get a job, you know,
Right.
and then work till you die. It's
Yeah.
kind of that, you know, yeah, if you have a passion for this, you love this, and you want to dive more into it, and you know, just you find it, like it finds you, and they giving people opportunities, you know, to make that impact, make that contribution, who, you know, are not afraid to put in the work, put in the effort, and
Right.
you know, and that's
Yeah.
that's huge.
I would love to, you know, if it could pay my bills, I would love to just go out and just convince people that, hey, you can be a rocket scientist. Like,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen tomorrow. You know, it's definitely not going to happen tomorrow. There's work you got to put in,
Yeah.
but you can, you know what I mean? And
Exactly.
you can do huge things, you know, that matter
Mm-hmm.
to the process. You know,
Exactly.
you don't have to just be, you know, a cog in the wheel. You know, like you can be a major player.
Yeah, you can make an impact in your way, you know, in a way that works for you, and that's the phenomenal part, because I think it's easier to get people like inspired about space and get, you know, get interested about it, because it's so fascinating just, you know, by itself. But giving people that understanding that this is something you can contribute to, this is something you can make an impact in, you know, this is
Right.
you know, a career path. This isn't just something for like exclusive people or for people who go to MIT and get PhDs. Like, you can go any route and make your impact, make your contribution, and you know, there will be people, especially in the space community, that'll help you find your way, you know, to get there. Because that's one of the things that I'd really like to push even further, is just the shared mentality of people within the space community. It's something that I've always loved about it, you know,
Right.
that natural curiosity, but then just that overwhelming desire to help, you know, people, and just to live better, to be better. And you know, they have such good like mentalities towards, you know, just providing support for people, you know, and extending their hand, you know, diving into new problems and making and finding solutions for those. It's really phenomenal, and I love the mindset of it. And so yeah, just yeah, beyond that, like you have a lot of expertise in so many different areas, you know, and then you coming from like the background that you did, and finding, you know, your path like through your passions. And so just knowledge or advice you'd like to share, you know, to maybe somebody who is maybe stuck in that rut, but you know, just has that passion, or you know, thinks deeply about, you know, wanting to be a part of space and the industry. Just what's your knowledge and advice for them that are out there thinking, you know, maybe this isn't something I can do?
I would honestly, just tell people to, you know, as much as cliche as it is, you know, you know, there's all those things about like, oh, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. You know, well, that's a lie. Because you find something you love doing, you're probably going to end up doing it 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
But you know, like, to really actually pursue what you're passionate about, not because of some you know, fortune cookie message or Instagram inspirational quote, you know, but do what you're passionate about, because you're just going to naturally be better at it. You know, if you buy a car that you really love, you're going to keep it cleaner, and you're going to change the oil more often, you know. And if you pursue a career that you genuinely like, you know, while you may not be as successful, you know, in the short term, as if you chase something else where you have a, you know, like maybe you know a guy or whatever, you know, you may not be as immediately successful, but over the long term, you're going to be far more successful, because you're going to be invested, and you're going to be willing to make sacrifices, and put in, you know, long hours doing something that you're genuinely passionate about, you know. And so if space is really your passion, you know, I would say, like, do whatever you can do right now, no matter how small that feels. If all you can do to be involved in space right now is watch a YouTube video like this or read a book, then do that. you know,
Yeah.
do that and take notes on that book and write them down, and then write your own book, you know, and don't worry about how big or small anything feels in the moment, you know, because that career at the end of the day, like, you know, like it's all about a body of work, not an individual accomplishment, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's, you know, like, chase your passions, chase your dreams, you know, as cliche as it is, you know, really throw yourself into what your, you know, your aptitude supports, and you enjoy doing, you know, because you're just going to be better at it naturally. You know, it's going to happen with it without you.
Yeah, and I will say that, you know, people recognize, you know, when you have a passion for it, you know, they can feel that. You know, when you go into a field and you're pursuing something, you know, like they can feel it. You know, I've worked with this company Reviture for a couple months now, I think about 6 or 7, but we train people to, you know, write software development and write code. And, you know, I've experienced, you know, people that come in and just like, they have a passion for it. They're inspired by it, and they want to tackle everything, and they reach out to me and they're like, what more can I do? You know, it's just because you can feel it's what they love to do. So, and, you know, hearing different stories of, you know, people that are chasing different things, you know, everything from nursing, you know, to like, especially working in healthcare. I mean, there's some passionate people driven towards that as well. And it's really phenomenal, like what you can do, you know, when you dedicate yourself, you know, to what you're good at and what you love to do.
Yeah. And there's a lot of there's a lot to be said for having the courage or the wherewithal, you know, to put yourself out there, you know. And even if you don't believe, you know, the idea of fake it till you make it, absolutely do that. You know what I mean? Like, if there's an opportunity you see that you want, then go after it, whether you have the skills to make it happen or not, you know, because it's in those failures, you know, it's in the Mark 1 explosions and the SN4 explosions, you know, that we've learned how to build SN20, you know. That's the same. It's like, in as far as like your life goes, those are the same things, you know. It's the test vehicles that you blow up because you don't have the skill set yet, or you're not mentally capable, you know, yet of tackling that problem. That's okay. You still have to go and have that explosion and gather your data, you know what I mean, and build your next iteration, you know. So like, I one of the things that I guess that I advise people on the most, you know, is just do the thing, you know, like, don't. And I was just saying this the other morning to my girlfriend about a business thing that she wants to do. Don't get so wrapped up in the preparation that you never do the thing,
Yeah.
you know, and don't let the preparation or the parts that are still missing from the preparation stop you from just doing the thing, you know.
Oh, without a doubt. And I can be the first to tell you, yeah, definitely just get started. You know, there's so many realms in my life where I felt lost, and I was like, I had these ideas, but I was like, maybe I need to spend more time refining those ideas. Maybe I need to spend more time thinking it through. And then it never went anywhere. I never got started. I never did those. And yeah, I mean, looking back, like, I don't have any regrets, but at the same time, you know, it's taking that initiative and just finding a way to get started. Like with Naut Normal specifically, I knew that I wanted to build a framework to train civilians to be astronauts. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have, you know, capital to manifest like infrastructure in order to do that. You know, I don't know the right people to talk to for certifications on that, or, you know, I need to spend so much time researching, you know, what it takes to even get to that point. And I was like, well, let's go down further. Well, they're going to need a fitness program. They're going to need education. It's like, so those are things that I can start to explore, but again, there's still some infrastructure that I have to build, some time that I have to put in. And I broke it down as like, what can I do right now? Like, what can I get started on? You know, what can I do? And just, yeah, and this is it right here. So this is me just getting started. And that's what I have to say is, you know, find a way to just get started. And that's more important than anything, because I don't remember who said it, but it's like, if you don't start now, then you never will.
Yeah, I've quit on a lot of projects, you know, like I'm a project starter, you know, and I would hesitate to call myself a project finisher, you know, because I've started to do the homework and put the pieces in place to do so many things, and I've gotten so caught up in the process of trying to start it, that I ended up with nothing, and that's why now I'm just like, screw it, like I'm in a position where like I have rent to pay, I have bills to pay, and there's somebody offering me a full-time job, and I'm like, no, I don't want your full-time job. I just want to, kind of do this thing for a week or so, and
Exactly.
and it's, for the most part, it's working out. It's terrifying, I'm not gonna lie, but most giant leaps of faith are,
They are extremely intimidating, extremely. But yeah, that's phenomenal to hear, how everything's going. So a couple more points that I want to hit. Naturally, I'm going to ask this to everybody, who should I interview next? Who's on my list?
Well, so I definitely would like to see you interview, the guy who brought me into SpaceX, Jason Clark. He's a phenomenal guy. He is, I think what I enjoy the most about being a colleague of his is that he has this will about him, and this stoicism that is inspiring. Like I've worked with, my military career spanned 97 to 2007. So enduring freedom, Iraqi freedom, Desert Fox. Like all these major operations.
Yeah.
And I've got people who were my maintenance officer and my division officer. Now, one of my division officers just took over an entire Air Force base in Texas, and one of my maintenance officers is an admiral running, naval region Singapore. And I've been around so many people who are like just these wildly successful figures. But Jason Clark is one of the people that I respect the most, because the way that I have been able to see him deal with people, and the way he deals with me. I'm a problem at work sometimes. I love to drink and have a good time, and I by the time I'm done having a thought, the first half of it is already out of my mouth. I'm kind of a liability. I'm not the easiest guy to employ.
Go-getter mentality.
Yeah, but he is, the man is unflappable. You're not going to elicit an emotion out of this guy other than calm, cool, and collected. And his ability to absorb knowledge and then put it into practice, the same day is incredible. Like if I were trying to do what I'm doing now and I had his brain, I would, I would probably be funding your project right now because that's that much more successful, But aside from him, I would, in order to flesh out what you're doing, I would say, I would start to reach out towards, pilots, to start to put some background together for the level of physical training, that you need to get involved with, and I guess the background knowledge, that you have. I feel like Inspiration 4 really kind of levels the playing field for you. You know what I mean? Because now we know, like don't get me wrong, the people on that flight are, they're not exactly bottom of the barrel. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
They're medical industry and aerospace people, but they are still average Joes. They're still they're not all naval test pilots and and whatnot.
Straight from the civilian sector,
yeah. And so, as much as I would say to to kind of stay on theme with the pilots and whatnot, I think it might do some good too, just to grab a person off the street, honestly, and ask the same barrage of questions, and get into the same topics.
Yeah.
And then just like compare their answers to mine, and then compare our two answers to the next person, and because at the end of the day, like you're, the whole thing is to bring, that, the excitement and the knowledge level of an astronaut to everybody in the neighborhood,
Exactly.
And, so I would definitely say don't limit yourself on who you're going to interview.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah, and I think diversity is definitely a core value of what I'm aiming for. Is getting those pilots in here and some astrophysicists, people who understand cosmology and physics and all these things, but then also getting store clerks and people just are all around the neighborhood, all around the community, and just people you wouldn't expect to have these really strong like envisionments for what our future looks like, and and how integrated space is to them, and how much they understand it, and what they'd like to know more about. I mean, all those things. Like, diversity is definitely a huge core value and I think that's a great point to bring up. Is no limitations, just bring in everybody. I want to hear what everyone has to say about it. So if you're watching this and you'd like to share your opinion on some of these questions and topics that we discovered, and share your story on what inspires you about space, or what scares you about it, all of those things, like, I want to hear them, I want to share them. And I want us all to be able to recognize that everybody like has a reason to enjoy space and what's going on. So the last question is very philosophical, and I don't know what you thought of when you read it, when I passed over the outline, but this is a question that I'm going to ask everybody, because I love conceptual philosophy of space, and all of those things, and how it affects psychology and stuff like that. And so, what do you think about when you look up at the sky?
It's another one of those answers that has kind of like evolved over time. Like, before you asked me that question, like, I feel like I had a different answer. I feel like from when I saw that question in the email, and I thought about it to myself, like, I used to look up and just think, man, I wish I had, I used to think about it from an I wish perspective. I wish I had gone and become a pilot, or I wish I were an astronaut or whatever, But now that I've been able to kind of reflect on it, like, I still feel that kind of like that wonder, and that, like, I don't know, like a kind of a hope, like, man, I hope this Mars thing happens within my life, and I hope that the very next generation, I don't want it to take 100 years. I want people from my children's generation to look at their TV and see a kid, see a rocket land on Mars, and see people, on Mars. Like, I want that to happen now. I want to see it,
Mm-hmm.
But now when I look up, like, I'm genuinely just excited that, I don't know, that like those things that seemed so far away, and all the, like the childhood dream of being an astronaut, the childhood dream of wondering what's out there, and and like trying to understand how vast, the universe is. Like, I like, now when I look up, I'm happy and I'm excited that so much more of that knowledge is, like, available to kids as soon as they can read, as soon as they can, as soon as they hit that age of reasoning. They know so much, like, in such an exponential amount more about what's going on up there than I do. Even, like, like, they'll know everything I know when they're able to speak and explain it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
No, it does. Yeah.
And on the egotistical side, like, I'm thankful and I'm, like, proud, no lie, to be able to say that, like, I influenced that,
Yeah.
things that I built are up there right now. Things that I, like, I determined as a person, that kid who was like I watched the space shuttle explode in a homeless shelter, as a kid. Like, that's a low moment, but now to think that, like, something in that same field, which was so unobtainable to me, and it was so much like watching a cartoon or a movie or something, like my stuff is up there now. I influenced how things were built that are up there operating right now, and it's mind-boggling.
Yeah. That's really phenomenal.
And,
well, I definitely love hearing that, just that inspiration, and it's truly wonderful to hear, just how you came from, like, watching that in a homeless shelter, and to actually influencing something that's going to end up taking people to Mars one day. And I couldn't agree more. Like, I hope that it happens faster, because that exposure. But bringing it, to these young kids, I think is just so vital, because they're, like, creative limitations. They don't have any. So it's,
Right.
learning this stuff at such an early age. I mean, I've seen videos of kids watching rocket launches and stuff like that and getting excited, inspired, and I'd like to bring that to the rest of the world. And so, because I feel like, the more minds we have on it, the more people we have inspired, the faster it's going to go and the better it's going to be for all of us, so yeah, I definitely agree. I'm very optimistic that, you'll get to see boots on the ground on Mars. So,
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We've hit just over about 2 hours, so it sounds about, our phone conversation as well. Yeah.
Oh, man.
I know.
Surprised it happened.
Exactly. Such a fun conversation, and thank you so much for sharing your story and, walking through some of those deeper philosophical questions with me. Yeah. And so, yeah. Any final thoughts?
I did want to, I didn't, I did definitely touch on the, the aspects of my childhood and whatnot, but one thing I wanted to do is I definitely wanted to shout out to somebody I wish you could interview, which is, my grandfather. He's the guy who, who really put the bug in me with his work. That B-2 bomber that you were so excited to see. He was one of the team of engineers that was like tucked away in a for 2 years designing and building those first 2 prototypes. And we didn't see Grandpa for a long time, and so like I can, like, in my head right now I have an image of the photo of him that sat on his bedside table in his spare room, and it's he and his girlfriend at the time standing in front of the first B-2 that got rolled out at Palmdale.
Wow.
And the rest of his house is a shrine to the F-18 Hornet that he was one of the design engineers on that as well. He worked on the mechanism for how the landing gear opened up for the naval version. And before that, when it was the YF-17, when it was competing with the F-16 for acceptance into the military at all, he worked on the leading edge extension and the design of the vertical stabilizers.
Wow.
And when I was a little kid, and as much as I was interested in aerospace and airplanes, and it was just fighter jets at that point for me.
Yeah.
But man, I did not care about the math and the structural stuff. I just want to know how fast it goes, Grandpa.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are those? How many of those missiles can it carry? But like now that I think back, like it really was important. And I wish I had listened a little more to the technical stuff that he had to tell me at the time, because maybe my timeline could have been pushed up quite a bit, and I could be sitting here having this conversation with you at 25 instead of 45. But I'm just happy to be here either way,
Yeah.
But I definitely want to give him a shout out. His name is Ralph Bravata Jr. And he got hired by Jack Northrop, and he was at Northrop, worked for Northrop and Grumman, and a short stint at Boeing for like over 50 years, and he's definitely like the catalyst to all this.
Well, that's phenomenal, and yeah, definitely thank you for giving him a shout out. He deserves it. For inspiring you, and the impact that you've made in the industry alone is definitely something to be proud of. So, well, thank you so much for being here. I couldn't thank you enough for just just latching on to my image and just wanting to take part in it. And thanks for being the first one that I get to interview. And I will say, like, since you kind of opened up the door for me, I mean, 3 or 4 more are like already in the works. So it's
awesome. Hell yeah.
It's getting started, and it's going to be fun. And I'm so glad that you're here to help take part in that. And just thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here. Thanks to everybody watching. And who will watch in the future. I'm going to be editing this over the week, get it out probably around Saturday. But for anybody that stuck around through the live video, just thank you so much. This has been a Not Normal interview, and I don't know why I like saying that so much. But,
I think it too. I'm excited to be part of it, man.
Yeah, and so definitely join the community. It's pretty in the early stages, but it's only going to grow from here. So jump in now, and I can't thank you enough for being a part of it. So thanks again for watching, and I think I'm gonna close it out there. So
all right.
So we'll go ahead and dive in. Thanks again, Jason, and Yeah, make sure you come back to every Friday at 5. I'm starting a Not Normal show, and we're going to be jumping into some interesting conversations. I'll definitely have you back, Jason, for one of those Friday at 5 shows.
Cool.
Yeah, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks again, everybody. And until next time, we are making Not Normal the new normal.